Hey Peyton, nice to see you again on this beautiful day. And this time with two quotes, one by Mark Andreessen and one by Dario Amodei. Let's go with Amodei first. He wrote it in an essay in November 24, where he said, if we get to the point where AI is past the professional level at most tasks, and we are able to build millions of these systems, you could think of it as a country of geniuses operating in the data center. That's a bizarre situation. Civilization has never been in a situation before like that. Mark Andreessen says AI will not destroy jobs, it will destroy tasks. That's a big difference. So Peyton, how do you relate to these two kinds of viewpoints? And what can you add to that?
Good to be back. Yeah, we are at what I view as the climax of human technology. And whether or not that's an over dramatization perhaps remains somewhat to be seen. But this concept of the country full of geniuses in a data center, I think, is one of the most insightful lenses through which we can view what is this technological force that is being rolled out in plain view and openly available to those of us with an internet connection and $20 that is novel in the history of our species. It's actually incredible how far they have gone with these digital intelligences that are available right now. And today is the worst these models will ever be. They are never going backwards. They're only going forwards, and they're going forwards at pretty incredible pace when you look at, for instance, how fast they make progress on benchmarks, which is, you can take that with somewhat a grain of salt on certain benchmarks, but certainly in terms of the real world utility of these things. If I compare, as somebody who's been using these regularly for the past few years, how far they have progressed in their ability to comprehend vast context and contribute genuine, insightful strategic contributions or useful work outputs done with only a few iterations of feedback, and to connect the dots and to point out blind spots and to help me arrive at better tactics and better strategies for doing things. And even to replace the work product of some professions that for many years have been very highly compensated, very gated behind high expensive rates, behind credentials, behind university degrees, etc. Now so much of thought output is available at our fingertips. And one of the benchmarks that I find the most interesting is this GDP val benchmark that's not even actually that updated, I don't believe, with this most recent wave of models that's dropped in the last month. But this is the metric that measures on how many specialized tasks within various professions an AI can one-shot an output that is superior to those people that are experts in their own field at an actual work output within their own field that is rated by neutral experts within that field who are blind to what was created by an AI versus what was really created by a human. And back when Claude Opus for perhaps 4.1 was out, so not this current generation, but the past, it was almost at 50%. And so when you think about accountants, engineers, lawyers, architects, and so many of the other white collar knowledge work professions that exist, almost half of them already AI is better at their actual job that they've trained their whole or much of their professional life to perfect. That's astounding. And that's unbelievably forward from where we were just 2 years ago with GPT-4, not to mention 5 years ago when none of us were even thinking about this yet. Back when the biggest form of AI that we encountered was the algorithms that were deciding what ad to show us next. It's come so far, so fast, and it continues to move forward on an exponential curve that we are in this time of technological transformation that is different than any of the technological broad-based technologies or general purpose technologies that have swept the world before, in the sense that it's much faster, and I would argue the ceiling is much higher on how transformational the impact could be. how do you view the country full of geniuses in a data center and the difference between killing a task versus killing a job, which I want to get back to because I have some disputes about.
Well, definitely we are at the junction in time where we now have intelligence available at our fingertips. And with a click of a button, with a good idea, we can prompt the model or the AI system to deliver us some quite reasonable and good output. And now it seems that our work has shifted to prompt the models and to verify the output instead of to copyright SEO blog post ourselves. So there's this vast availability of generative text and images and videos which are now available, and everybody can like produce something which is of high quality. This has many impacts also on a societal level in terms of, okay, it may be able to destabilize our society in terms of the spread of news which are not accurate, the denunciation of political people, or like deep fakes which are used to trick people out of money or out of resources or trick them into bad decisions. Like all the bad which is now available as well with all the good. You could also utilize that to promote your small, tiny brand because you cannot afford a whole marketing team. Now you have AI and you can definitely afford the $20 a month subscription, which can produce similar level output than as a marketing team like 5 years ago. That is pretty amazing. And the data center is full of geniuses. So there's this run towards building even more data centers as well, because who wouldn't want to have access to even more geniuses? Who wouldn't want to have like even more robots and geniuses work in the cloud 24/7 with much less pay to build some value out of nothing, out of thin air? For me, it's like a big explosion of potential value creation, a big explosion of the potential to mine the universe for pieces of value to be found and uncovered. And with more and more data centers is also the struggle and the problem about, okay, what is the environmental impact about this? How much energy does generating a video with VO3 use? Maybe it's like 1 hour hair drying the same amount. That's a lot. But I also have hope in terms of, okay, there are efforts to send just GPUs into space and give them free energy from the sun 24/7 and have a cooling system which doesn't use a lot of water. So you have like 4 Kelvin in the background of the space. And then you have like solar panels which can harvest and collect as much sun as they need. And so you are basically down in cost. So this is probably the next step, people sending out satellites worth of data centers and they connect via Starlink and have even faster communication than the underwater, deep sea underwater cables, which connect the continents through the cables we currently speak now in our podcast, in our conversations. And to the Mark Andreessen quote, he was one of the creators of the first internet browser. So he definitely has some intuition and feeling about that, but he's also like a venture capitalist and he has also some interests and therefore a need to form a narrative around that. I think it definitely destroys tasks, and I hope that this mostly the tasks which which humans don't want to do. They don't want to do it, and it can be automated, and that's the best utilization of automation. And then they gain more time to pursue more meaningful things, to pursue tasks which are work, which plays on their strength and on their creativity. So I think it's beneficial from now. But I think it destroys entry-level jobs in terms of the availability of them if they are not related to AI use cases and so on. It definitely You can see that in Toby Lutke's Shopify memo. He's the CEO of Shopify, and he made a top-down decision how to use AI. And now basically what he says, every prototype has to be done with the help of AI in any kind of way. If you don't use AI, you have to explain why you didn't use AI. The same with people. If you ask for the resources to employ more people, you definitely have to argue about why it cannot be done by AI. And so definitely there's no default on employing people anymore. There's a default on deploying AI agents and geniuses in the cloud. So this is definitely a shift, an interruption in the current flow. So definitely also some potential jobs will be destroyed. So what do you think about that, Peyton?
Yeah, you pointed out what comes to my mind with this Mark Andreessen quote, which is my objection that certainly not all jobs are going away overnight, but the bottom rungs of the career ladder are absolutely falling off. You do not need first-year accountants anymore to just manually enter debits and credits into QuickBooks like you did 10 years ago. You don't need entry-level first-year lawyers anymore to conduct basic case research and write the first draft of legal documents like you did 10 years ago. You don't need entry-level financial analysts to manually pull data from these sources and to manually code VLOOKUPs and if match functions like I used to do my first year of my career. And so the bottom rungs are falling off, which does create actually a really interesting circumstance that we are watching play out in slow motion right now. Everybody that's going to matriculate in law school in this coming fall may be accumulating a lot of debt with no promise of the ability to do anything economically useful on the other side. And a lot of times the way that we ascend our ladder of competency in our own life is first doing the menial stuff so that we can acquire taste and intuition, experience, and a context base of how things work and how to strategically move around the pieces in our mind that then we can operate at the higher level in 5 years or 10 years. And so there's no doubt that a financier or an accountant or a lawyer that's 10 years into their career and has really good refined discernment and judgment will be powerfully leveraged rather than replaced, at least for quite some time. But the bottom rungs of the career ladder are falling off. That's where most of the people that are fresh out of college have to start. What are they going to do? I don't know. But I don't think that it's a simple, oh, there's merely tasks, all jobs will stay the same. It's absolutely going to be an overturning of the systems of how job market and employment works. And I don't feel like we've fully addressed, and maybe we can't yet fully address or solve in an easy way the issue of what about all the people that are trying to get their start? What are they going to do? And in terms of what AI replaces, what it can do, I think it's important to recognize that the current stage we're at is it's very middle to middle. It's not very end to end yet. And so the opportunities for us as we get better at using this, as we find ways to deploy it, for those of us who are entrepreneurs or those of us who are doing strategic work in any sense, a lot of times a really, really powerful unlock is to see there's a technology and a resource over there, the country full of geniuses in a data center, but they're not going to come over here into my computer unless I talk to them, unless I invite them, unless I work with them. And when they do talk, they're not going to actually publish their stuff out into the real world or implement their stuff out of the real world unless I connect it. And so what do we do with this? What is the opportunity here? I would contend that one framework through which we can view unlocking the leverage that is available from a country full of geniuses in a data center is being a bridge builder. How do we build a bridge between a problem here and a solution to the problem? And then upon finding the solution to the problem, which by the way, we need to get good at iterating with these things rather than expecting these things to one shot because they really don't one shot well still, but iterating within this system to work with the country of geniuses in a data center to manufacture a solution or an output that's really good for a problem, and then building the bridge of this solution to implementation in the real world. These two bridges, because this thing is really elite and really powerful from middle to middle, but not yet from end to end, it is building the bridge from problem to solution creation, and then from solution creation to implementation. This is where there's a huge amount of novel value to be unlocked, similar to how I imagine if you have an oil field or a field with a ton of oil reserves under it, and then all of a sudden humans invent, oh crap, there's tons of stuff we can do with oil. This is a valuable resource that was under the earth this whole time. And now we can extract it and we can utilize it for this and this. If I have the field, but I don't actually pull the oil out of the field and transport it to a place where it can be burned and used, then it remains an untapped resource. And so this is kind of like, oh, there's this giant resource that's available that's new. How do I tap that resource in what I'm trying to do to save me time or to leverage, or importantly, to augment and improve the highest quality output that I can create? And that's
Mhm.
where the truly elite use of AI must go. It's not merely about saving me time. That's the entry level of AI use, is trying to save time on tasks. The advanced level of AI use is to do with collaborating with this country full of geniuses in a data center to create outputs, to create strategies, to create forms and functions of intelligence that are absolutely far beyond what I can do independently, even with 10 times as much time. It's improving the ceiling of our quality of work. This is how we can get truly to the advanced level and the highest potential of these tools and this resource, I would argue. So, what does that look like? How do we get good at this brand new meta skill now that this resource has been introduced to the world?
Talking points, Peyton. And curiously, I think how we get good at this is refocusing our efforts on basic communication skills, on basic skills like clarity, on the principles which are very old and still very recent, because with these skills of having clarity of thought, having clarity in your communication, giving all the context the model needs, and having the empathy into something lifeless as a statistical model. Who knows how much life there will be in the coming years, but it is very important to have empathy as well. Like the basic things which make us human and effective in being human is also necessary for building a bridge from this country full of geniuses in a data center into the real world. Because if you don't communicate with clarity, you are producing sound, and then there is no signal in the noise. But what you want is, like you said, is augment your highest quality output, which you, as a unique human being, only you can produce and can think of. Because obviously we are unique, and there's these potentials which only we can discover and uncover, because it's our taste we want to bring into the world. It is our viewpoints which we want to see the world developing into. And therefore, it is about communication. Because language is one mode of it, but if your language is not full of clarity, then the model output will also be a lot of noise and you cannot utilize it. But in order to improve your output in the quality and have it faster so that you can iterate it much faster, you definitely need to think about your empathy towards the model. What does the model need from me in terms of information and in terms of guidance and clarity in prompting it, that it produces the output that I envisioned? I think there's this big opportunity for it. This Elon Musk who once tweeted, it may be that we as a human are the bootloader for digital super intelligence. That is pretty interesting thought, because there are a lot of people who see that there's a lattice work of potential intelligences and forms of intelligence. And if you look at slime moles and how they solve the Byzantine general problem in a linear manner when the problem scales, instead of a computer who like exponentially more time in solving it as the problem scales, then you see, okay, there's different intelligences embedded in the real world as well. There are companies who pursue their own goal, and there are a collection of people and systems which also shape according to market forces and so on. But what if we can make sand into silicon wafers and make that think for itself? And is it thought, or is it just outputting the rules of language? Like Stephen Wolfram, one of the greatest physicists of our time, in my opinion, mentions that in the process of training an artificial neural net, it is mining the computational universe for potential rules. So it's rediscovering the rules of language that were discovered by people in different countries. So it's a pretty interesting thought, because it's only creating what is possible. And then the other way around is, okay, just because we do not see that the sand is thinking, does it really mean it does not think? So there's a whole lot of questions coming from that, but there's no doubt in my mind that this technology will evolve and will accelerate in the speed of evolution, in my opinion, that soon we'll not have only data centers on Earth, but also data centers in space. And then we have intelligent robots. And then you go to the next step of the von Neumann probes. It's John von Neumann, who's also one of the creators of the architecture of the PC, like with RAM and CPU and so on. And he had thinking idea as an experiment where, what if you build a robot which can build robots just like itself? And I think it will be definitely possible in the future. So in one step towards that point is having these data centers as satellites in the orbit. So, and then they can like go onto asteroids, mine the resources there, build their factories there, and then explore the universe just as sand, which thinks, like a super intelligence, which reproduces itself. And that's a pretty interesting thought. But also the thought that humans are much more resilient, because silicon wafers and sand, you see for yourself, your laptop you had 10 years ago probably doesn't work so good anymore, or the laptop you had like 20 years ago probably not in use anymore. We humans will still be relevant in terms of just staying in our biology. But still, I think the old principles of clarity of communication, simplicity, empathy will remain as relevant as ever. What is your thinking on this?
Well, I'm surprised to find that I actually do find the possibility of von Neumann probes careening through the universe as fairly probable within this century, which is crazy on its surface.
Yeah.
And before I extrapolate out that far, I'll take a step back. And think about what we're about to experience this decade. What is going to happen when we have a country full of geniuses in a data center? And what occurs to me is, think about all of the most brilliant scientists that have existed in the last 100 years and what they've done. Think about the advent of course, computation, the advent of vaccines, the advent of so many of these medical technologies that have just come onto the playing field in the last 100 years, of nuclear power and many on the energy sense, solar power, and of these unimaginable technologies that we have today. We went to the moon. We humans went to the moon. And all of this has happened in the last 100 years with a very finite amount of scientists. Like, we didn't have a billion scientists in the last 100 years. I would argue that of real humans that were moving forward some frontier of science and technology, the number would be perhaps in the millions and not in the tens of millions, but certainly not in the hundreds of millions. And so, what if you have 100 years and you have 100 billion scientists rather than 100 million, or rather than 10 million? What if you literally 1000x the number of brilliant minds performing novel experiments? And perhaps many of these experiments happen first in simulated environments where a year of experiment can be done in a day. before the winners are selected to be really tested in the real world. And all of these scientists are effectively multiplied. And you have ones that are, let's imagine, just as intelligent as the most intelligent human scientists, or even take a step back and say maybe they're not on the level of literally John von Neumann personally, but the 99.9th percentile scientist, yes. And so, what if you had 1,000 times more scientists and they could do experiments 1,000 times faster in simulations, and then the winners go to the real world to be really tested? And then let's look at what is already happening from these researches. We see that AlphaFold has
Mhm.
sequenced all of the proteins in a way that's just totally unlocking new medical insights and new possibilities of
200
having.
billions of them, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. And these new mathematical formulas, even. We've had advances in algorithms and proofs in unsolved mathematical problems that have stumped the world's brightest mathematicians for decades, that have been solved in the last year by these intelligences. And so, what happens when you have a country full of geniuses in a data center for 10 years? That's about what we're going to witness. Like it's kind of been built in the last year. If you look at where Gemini is right now, if you look at where Claude is right now, and you think about how far they've advanced in the last year, if we get even one more year of this rate of progress, it is at that level, a country full of geniuses in a data center. What does that mean? I believe that we will see various degrees of warp speed in technological progress, depending on how the bottlenecks flow for that specific type of technological development. And it'll be bifurcated by which ones of these can you really perform a lot of the experimentation and in knowledge generation in the data center versus which one of them rely on human hands at the speed of a 9 to 5 work week to implement experiments that play out over a long period of time and may need to be approved by regulatory bodies until they can be fully deployed. This is some of the differences in speed, but I think at the level of a decade, it's very possible that we will cure a vast array of diseases that have been elusive to us forever. And we will invent vaccines to diseases that we've never had before, and maybe to the majority of them. We will invent new building materials that we can make stuff out of that's way more robust, way cheaper to manufacture. We will be able to 3D print a ton of really good stuff that will be really good for people. It will advance human prosperity. We will get far better yield per acre from all of our cropland. So hopefully we can return some of that cropland to be wilderness again, which I'm really hoping for. There's going to be new forms of energy production. We're going to invent new forms of carbon capture that can reverse so much of the damage that has been done to the ecosystems of the earth. The potential for prosperity and abundance of this technology playing out to invent sweeping waves of all other kinds of technology is right here, and it's about to go down, and it is already in the process of going down. The potential there is unbelievably promising and transformational in a way that no other technology before, I would argue, has ever swept the world in such a fast, rapid, and transformational way. This is what I believe we are in for.
Mhm.
And when we think about what it will look like, the scaling laws come to my mind as a really interesting maybe physics of the industry to pay attention to. They seem to believe, the frontier labs, that every time you get an extra order of magnitude of compute, that the capabilities of these systems, they used to say double, but it increases meaningfully. And so all of these labs are gearing up at, okay, last year we ran $100 million training run. This year we're going to run $1 billion training run. Next year we're going to run a $10 billion training run. And in 2 years, we want $100 billion training run. And so these scaling laws will be crazy. There will be whole nuclear reactors, and there already are, but there will be many giant nuclear reactors that specifically power one data center. There will be data centers the size of cities and maybe of the size of clusters of cities or metropolitan areas or whatever. It will be crazy to see. And there's no limit. If these scaling laws hold indefinitely, there will be no end in sight. There could be country-sized data centers eventually, which would be is kind of sci-fi to think about. But the scaling laws are really a force in all of this in terms of what we will see in the actual infrastructure play out to support the growth and advancement of these technologies in the coming years. It'll kind of, I think it'll feel like it's kind of in the background, and then it'll be like, whoa, that's huge all at once. Same with
Mhm.
these technologies that are developing. I think right now we're in this background stage where you see headlines, but you don't yet see this tidal wave of transformation of the world and prosperity and technology and material abundance and all of these things. But it's coming, and it's going to be crazy, and not in 100 years, but in 10 years. It's going to be unbelievable. How do you think about this wave that we would expect? How does the math play out? If there is a country full of geniuses in a data center that anybody can access for $20 a month, what does that mean? How does that look? How does that play out?
How does that play out? Well, it's impossible to see the future, but I think the future is bright as well. There will be change. It will be painful for some people, and some people will win more. But humanity, in my opinion, will be probably better off because of all the solutions to knowledge problems that will be discovered. And I think David Deutsch, the physicist who was the inventor of the quantum computer, or the describe who produced the first descriptions, and the quantum computer was a way to test his hypothesis of the multiverse theory. He says that it's just a lack of knowledge. If you think resources are limited and you need to take action to like keep the population in check, then it's a misdirected Malthusian argument where Malthus try to like sterilize Indian people just because he predicted, oh, there will be a limit of resources and the crop yield will be bad and so on. So, but it's totally misdirected, because with the discovery of new knowledge, there's also the potential to uncover vast amounts of new resources, like you said. Okay, how do we access that? Definitely in the future, the bridge to access these resources, all this intelligence, all these geniuses in the data center will be built out, and anybody will be able to use it. It will be in almost any piece of technology you can imagine. AI will be there to be a better interface, to be more usable, for technology to vanish in the background, so that people will have access to this technology, will have access to this intelligence, but not necessarily feel the interaction, because the design of technology becomes good when the technology disappears in the background, when you don't even know what kind of on what kind of shoulders of giants you stand, but you will see farther. I think data centers will also be built out, and there will be much more, because it's just, if you can double the amount of geniuses, why not? It definitely makes sense, because you just can produce much more value with it if you have a system and if you have more people accessing that. But also, I think it will be in space before there will be country-sized data centers. Maybe both, I don't know. But definitely this is the thing. Then there's still the existential risks of a misguided AI, but I hope people like Demis Hassabis will steward AGI into existence in a positive manner, so it will support humanity. And I'm pretty inspired by the story of Demis Hassabis as well. Like a former jazz prodigy in young age, he found a deep mind and with AlphaFold, solved the protein folding problem, and just gave it away as a gift to humanity. Now, anything which is newly discovered probably will link a little bit to the protein structures he calculated, because there was this meeting where they said, okay, we could predict all possible proteins within 1 month. And then he said, no, we just do that. Why don't we do that? Oh, yeah, let's do that. Mine the computational universe for all potential structures, and then just give it to the world and build access to it, so that researchers all around the world can access them easily. The vast amount of potential which this gives to humanity in terms of discovering stuff which solves a lot of problems which were unsolvable before. Like programming the decay of plastics. You can like use proteins to have plastics which which disintegrates after 30 days or whatever. Or you could get some new like solutions to cancer cells which need a certain kind of protein to replicate or whatever. You can definitely do much with that. And I have high hopes that this will be good. And even when Google acquired DeepMind, it basically paid for itself because they used AI to optimize the energy usage in the data centers they used to train DeepMind in a way that it paid itself. Like more than $600 million in energy costs have been saved with that, I think, or will be possible to amortize that. So how will it be? I don't know. But will it be good? I think so. Will it be bad? Maybe. Will there be painful change? Definitely yes. But therefore, in my opinion, definitely makes sense to double down on your humanity. Just learn how to play an instrument. Just tap into your creativity. Discover what makes you unique and double down on that, triple down on that, and use AI as an exocortex to leverage these skills. And that's the whole discovery process. So any closing thoughts, Peyton?
Yeah, I'll touch on a few and maybe dump some more new concepts, but I totally agree with your outlook on this is such an unbelievable unlock for our species that we've never seen before. The potential for good, the potential for abundance are unparalleled with anything that has come before. It is truly unique, this moment in our history. The existential risk that comes from introducing something this powerful is very real. We don't know what we're doing. We've never run this playbook before. We don't know how it ends. We're walking through a one-way threshold. And in fact, I think it would be maybe worth us circling back to on a whole other podcast what we think about the possibilities on both sides. There's some pretty coherent logical arguments that both sides make about the existential risk and the P-doom, so to speak, of these technologies. But what's true is, regardless of whether or not this is, there's tons of existential risks that face our species. We have the possibility of somebody creating novel diseases. Prior to AI, this was already on the table. We had nuclear weapons that were already on the table prior to AI. We have tons of other existential risks that already exist. This is the one that might help us to solve all the other ones. And so doing this one first actually does have some strategic merit, but it's not to dismiss the potential pitfalls or the power in either direction that this technology could yield if it's done irresponsibly, which would be interesting for us to circle back to. A couple of the other notes that I have based off of this discussion about jobs and the possibility of vast obsolescence of humans when you pair good robots at scale with country full of geniuses in a data center at scale and self-driving vehicles at scale. There could be a possibility where, and I'm not saying this is a future fact, but I can very easily envision a universe where half of humans or more cannot effectively trade their time for more resources than it costs them to live. And so what do we do then? I think that it's essential that as a species, we find a way to raise the floor of our whole species with these technologies that come. If we in fact experience the abundance of energy, resources, food, materials, all these things that we can use to provide the basic needs of humans, we absolutely must make sure that we raise the floor, and not merely the floor of the countries where this exists. It would be a terrible shame if we raise the floor in America because some of these technologies are invented here, and raise the floor of China because some of the other ones are invented there, and we forget about India, Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, these many places. We must have a species level view and a compassion that transcends our labels and nations and identities. It has to raise the floor of everyone. It's really important that when the time comes that we figure out a way to get that right, because the pie will probably be 100 times bigger eventually and 10 times bigger before it's 100 times bigger. Let's make sure everybody has a bite to eat. That's going to be really important. Some of the other things to just mention really quickly, I'm really interested in this chip supply chain, how there's only one company in the world that can manufacture the machines that create these chips with what they call deep ultraviolet or extreme ultraviolet light and that's in the Netherlands. There's one company that can make those machines, nobody else, and they're crazy advanced machines, and
Yes, it's
everybody's tried and can't do it. Then there's one company in the world that can use these machines to make these chips or make these semiconductors that have these things that are only 3 to 4 nanometers in length, this ultra precise manufacturing. And then there's only one company that makes the GPUs that are used, well, maybe two, if you include both NVIDIA and Google, but very limited, the manufacturing at each of these stages of the chain. And so if this is the most valuable resource that our species has, and these scaling laws will continue, where it's going to be a race to build the next 10 times bigger data center every year, these are going to be some of the most powerful geopolitical inflection points that exist in the world, and maybe the most. If you look at China looking at that factory in Taiwan, and China's not allowed to have those semiconductors because there's export controls, China's going to be hungry for that factory in Taiwan, or at least want to blow it up so nobody can have it if they don't have it. And these forces are going to be really apparent to us. This dynamic is going to be really apparent to us, as if there was only one country that had, or as if there only had all the oil and one country that could refine all the oil. They would be really big strategic inflection points.
Mhm.
And the last little bit, two things. One is just a note about robotics. It's right there too, and it's just going to be a couple years longer to scale up our manufacturing of them, as well as self-driving. And the last note on a separate thing that I'm going to mention is just a few tactics, really practical advice on how to use these things in our own life that might be helpful as downloads. So one, I highly suggest people use not just one model, but use 2 to 3 models to collaborate with each other, because any one model will have blind spots and they'll go on tangents. They'll overemphasize this, they'll hallucinate about this. But when you give the same prompt with deep context to 3 models, and then you use these two and you say, and you bring them over to this one, you say, this is what I got from other 2 models, weave them together, think critically about this, give me the one output. And then you take this one output and then you get feedback on that from the other 2, and refine by collaborating with these 3, as well as providing your own insights and your own perspective and what you view as the priorities. You will get much further than if you merely communicate with one model. So for me, I think Claude and Gemini are the 2 leaders right now, and I would not go without either of them. The second is feeling out their strengths and weaknesses. You actually do get a feel using multiple models that Gemini is by far the best for visual intelligence at processing this photo, and Claude is by far the best writer, for example. And ChatGPT has the best voice mode where you can talk back and forth in conversation. And so getting a feel for the strengths and weaknesses and learning when to use what and how to use them together, it's a part of the skill. The next is tons of context and clear goals. These are the 2 most important ingredients that you have when you work with these things. So you want it to have a clear picture of what exactly you want in the universe, and a clear picture of what you want it to give you as an output to move you closer to that universe that you want. And then once it's clear on the goals and the objectives, you want to give it a ton of context. So if you're working for a company, you might give it your website, you might upload these SOPs that you already have, you might upload these 10 different documents of associated things so it gets a feel for the big picture and the associated map and how you've tried to approach this problem and the tactics that are available to it. The
Definitely, yeah.
context and big context is very, very useful. And a part of giving it the best context is yapping, turning on the whisper flow and just blah, 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 blah for 5 minutes about all that you can think about this task and how to get better at it. Those are, I would say, at least in my own opinion, some of the most important little tactics if we want to improve our meta skill of using AI. I highly recommend playing around with those things. Anything else from you? I guess I'm talking to the expert here of tactics with AI. Do you have any final tactics to share? Any perspective on all of that, or closing thoughts?
Well, experiment and experiment further, but take all the tips which Peyton gave you right now and experiment with these, because these tips are great. Yeah. Clarity is first. Have a clear goal in mind, and then have a clear description of the output you envision, and then give it tons of context. Like this is still, I call it the intern principle, because AI is not artificial intelligence, not alien intelligence. It's an intern. Imagine you have this savant intern starting at your company, and doesn't have context about what you want him to do. If you just say, okay, process this document like we do it, he will probably not tell you anything. He will just produce stuff he thinks which is relevant to you, but probably will be off by far. But if you give it the context, if you have the empathy to the model, towards the model as an intern which freshly started at your company, and give it all the context, give it all the standard procedure, the standard operating procedures, give it all the explanations of what connects to whom and how, and then definitely will produce much better output because it's a genius in a data center in the cloud. This perspective gives you a little bit more empathy towards what you want will be produced if you can state it with clarity.
Agreed. Agreed. Wonderful. Well, I'm inspired. I think that this is a fascinating time to be alive, to say the least. This is
Definitely.
not like I expect the world to be 10 years ago. May we
Definitely not. Who could
may we walk
predict?
forward?
Who could predict it? Definitely the most exciting time to be alive, and the best is yet to come, as my
Yeah.
mama always says.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed. And my final intention here is to use this resource toward the most important things in my life. So leverage it toward improving my meta skills. How can AI make me better at managing my own energy? How can AI make me a better learner? How can AI even make me more aware? How can AI make me a better leader? And where am I not applying this where it could actually be a big unlock that I haven't even thought of leveraging this resource for this thing? How can I build a bridge where it will really, really improve the quality of my life or performance or how I'm able to show up for others? This is the just open eyes, check it out, look around, see what I might not be thinking of, as well as just have an open posture and an open palm toward the future. Be surfers on the waves and let go of control because none of us have the option of control.
So true, man. Thank you very much. Yeah, anybody can be a king now with a multitude of servants. If you can utilize your creativity and build the bridge of your imagination into the real world, you definitely can use AI for having coaches, having producers, having employees, which actually produce the stuff into the real world, which you can envision. So it's a happy time to be alive, and now go out in the world and try.
And see what happens. Yes, sir. I will talk to you in the next one, my friend.
Talk to you soon, man. This was a pleasure as always. See you, man.
Agreed. Agreed. Likewise. Take care.